In the history of geopolitics, there are mistakes, there are blunders, and then there are catastrophes so profound they rewrite the map of the world. We are currently living through one of those moments. For 175 years, the border between the United States and Canada was boring. It was the longest undefended border in human history, a testament to a partnership so seamless that most Americans forgot it was even international territory. But that era is over. It didn't end with a war. It didn't end with a terrorist attack. It ended with a sentence. Canada relies entirely on the US. We don't rely on Canada. It sounds strong. It sounds like the assertion of a superpower that stands alone. But I am here to tell you that this single sentence is perhaps the most dangerous economic lie ever told by an American president. It is a lie that ignores physics, chemistry, and the basic architecture of the North American continent. If the United States actually tried to live by those words, if America truly attempted to cut the cord with the North, the result wouldn't be independence. It would be a collapse. We're talking about the lights going out in Manhattan. We're talking about refineries on the Gulf Coast turning into rust belts. We're talking about a manufacturing heart attack that would make the 2008 recession look like a minor correction. They call it the 51st state strategy. But on this channel, we look at the raw materials, the logistics, and the hard numbers, and the numbers are screaming a warning. Welcome to the Metal Reserve. Today, we are breaking down the $3 trillion mistake that could end the American century. To understand the magnitude of this crisis, we have to strip away the political theater. This isn't just about a personality clash between leaders. It is about a fundamental misunderstanding of how the modern world is built. When the president declared that the United States does not rely on Canada, he wasn't just speaking off the cuff. This is a calculated doctrine. The narrative being sold to the American public is simple. The US is the powerhouse, the consumer, the sun around which the Canadian planets orbit. In this worldview, Canada is a dependency that needs to be brought to heel, or perhaps simply absorbed as the 51st state. But this narrative commits the cardinal sin of economics. It confuses size with leverage. Yes, the US economy is 10 times larger than Canada's, but in complex systems, the smallest component can often be the most critical. You can have a massive, powerful engine, but if you remove the spark plug, that engine is nothing more than a heavy block of metal. For the last century, American industry has not just traded with Canada, it has integrated with it. We aren't looking at two separate economies shaking hands across a fence. We are looking at a Siamese twin. The nervous systems, the circulatory systems, the skeletal structures, they are fused. When you look at the rhetoric coming out of Washington, the threats of tariffs, the questioning of sovereignty, the open discussion of annexation, you are seeing an attempt to perform separation surgery with a chainsaw. And nobody seems to have checked if the patient can survive the procedure. Let's stop dealing in opinions. Let's look at the blood of the economy. Let's talk about energy. Energy independence is a favorite buzzword in American politics. You hear it in every campaign ad. We are the world's largest oil producer, they say. And technically, that is true. The fracking boom has made the US a titan of oil production. But here is the chemistry lesson that the politicians skip. Not all oil is created equal. The oil that comes out of Texas and North Dakota is largely light, sweet crude. It's thin, it flows easily, and it's low in sulfur. But for decades, the United States didn't produce enough oil, so it built its massive refinery infrastructure, billions of dollars of steel and pipes along the Gulf Coast to process the cheap, heavy, sludge-like oil that comes from foreign sources. Specifically, these refineries are optimized for heavy, sour crude. You cannot just dump light Texas oil into a heavy crude refinery. It's like trying to run a diesel engine on unleaded gasoline. It doesn't work. You need heavy oil to make the mix work. To produce the diesel, jet fuel and asphalt, the economy runs on. So where does that heavy oil come from? In 2024, Canada supplied 63% of all US crude oil imports. That is 4.1 million barrels of oil every single day. That is more than the US imports from every other country on Earth combined. When the administration says, we don't need Canada, they are effectively saying we don't need 4 million barrels of heavy crude daily. Okay, let's play that out. Where do we get it instead? Venezuela. Their production infrastructure has collapsed under decades of mismanagement. Mexico. Their output has been declining year over year. The Middle East? Sure, we could go back to relying on Saudi Arabia and Iraq, but that means longer shipping times, higher transport costs, and tethering the US economy back to the most unstable region on the planet. And remember, Canadian oil doesn't arrive on tankers that can be blocked by pirates in the Red Sea. It arrives via pipeline steel veins that are secure, constant, and instant. To replace Canadian oil would require a massive decade-long re-engineering of the entire US refining sector. It would cost hundreds of billions of dollars. And in the meantime, gas prices soar. Diesel shortages cripple the trucking industry. The cost of everything you buy, from groceries to Amazon packages, skyrockets because the fuel to transport them just got more expensive. That is the reality of the energy independence myth. The US is independent only on paper. In the real world, the US refinery system is addicted to Canadian heavy crude. But oil is just the start. If oil is the blood, electricity is the nervous system. And here, the dependency is even more terrifying. There are over 35 major transmission lines connecting the US and Canadian power grids. This isn't just about selling excess power, it's about survival. Because of geography, Canada has massive hydropower resources dams that run 24/7, providing cheap, clean baseload power. States like New York, New England, Michigan, and Minnesota don't just buy this power, they rely on it to keep the grid stable. Canada provides 82% of all electricity imported by the United States. Imagine a polar vortex hits the Midwest. Temperatures drop to -30. Everyone turns up their heat. The grid is strained to the breaking point. In that moment, the power flowing south from Manitoba and Quebec is the only thing standing between a warm home and a deadly blackout. And let's not forget natural gas. Canada supplies 98% of US natural gas imports. If you cut this off, if you treat Canada as an adversary, you aren't just raising prices. You are introducing structural instability into the US power grid. You are risking rolling blackouts in New York City. You are risking people freezing in their homes in Minnesota. When the Premier of Ontario floated the idea of cutting off electricity exports to the US in retaliation for tariffs, it wasn't an empty threat. It was a reminder. You can bully a trading partner, but you cannot bully the laws of supply and demand. The US energy grid was designed with the assumption that Canada is a friend. If Canada becomes an enemy, the grid is broken. Now let's move from commodities to manufacturing. This is where the sheer ignorance of the "we don't need Canada" doctrine becomes painful to watch. Modern manufacturing doesn't happen in one place. It happens everywhere, all at once. It's a concept called just-in-time manufacturing. Let's look at the automotive industry. It is the backbone of the American industrial base. When a Chevy Silverado rolls off the line in Michigan, it isn't an American truck. It is a North American truck. A single steering column might start as steel in Hamilton, Ontario. It crosses into Ohio to be stamped. It goes back to Ontario for assembly. It returns to Michigan for installation. That part might cross the international border 6 or 7 times before the truck is finished. Now imagine you slap a 25% tariff on every border crossing. You aren't taxing the Canadians. You are taxing yourself at every step of the production process. You are taking the most efficient supply chain in the world and pouring sand into the gears. We saw this happen in early 2025. When the first wave of tariffs hit, US imports fell by 20%. Why? Because American factories simply couldn't afford the parts anymore. They didn't switch to American suppliers because those suppliers didn't exist. You can't build a factory overnight. You can't train a workforce in a week. The result was a contraction in US manufacturing, layoffs, reduced hours, and inflation. The United States exports $350 billion worth of goods to Canada every year. Canada is the #1 customer for American businesses, not China, not Mexico, Canada. When you declare economic war on your biggest customer, you don't win. You destroy your own revenue stream. It is the business equivalent of a shopkeeper shooting his best patron because he thinks he's too reliant on his money. It makes no sense. But the damage goes beyond dollars and cents. There is a currency in geopolitics that is harder to earn than gold and much easier to lose: trust. The United States spent 70 years building a world order based on alliances: NATO, the G7, NORAD. These aren't just clubs. They are force multipliers for American power. They are the reason the US can project power globally. Canada has always been the first call, the most loyal ally, the brother in arms. When the President of the United States openly talks about annexing Canada, about erasing its sovereignty, he is sending a signal to the entire world. He is saying that American alliances are conditional. He is saying that sovereignty only matters if you are strong enough to defend it. If the US is willing to cannibalize its closest friend, what is Poland thinking right now? What is South Korea thinking? What is Taiwan thinking? We are already seeing the fallout. 82% of Canadians now say they would rather be a dominion of the British Empire than join the US. That is a staggering statistic. It represents the total collapse of American soft power. International observers are comparing this rhetoric to Russia's rhetoric on Ukraine. The idea that a powerful nation has a right to absorb its smaller neighbor. This is the language of empire, not democracy, and it pushes allies away. We are seeing Canada diversify. They are building new trade deals with Europe. They are looking to Asia. They are realizing that they made a mistake by putting all their eggs in the American basket. And once they build those new bridges, they won't tear them down just because Washington changes its mind. America is creating a rival on its northern border where there used to be a partner. And that is a strategic failure of the highest order. History is a graveyard of nations that believed their own hype. The Soviet Union believed it could ignore the laws of economics. It collapsed. Great Britain believed it could leave the European Union and retain all its influence. It stagnated. America is now flirting with a delusion of the same magnitude. The delusion is that America first means America alone. The truth, the cold, hard, mathematical truth, is that the United States is part of a continental system. The oil that fuels our cars, the gas that heats our homes, the electricity that powers our cities, and the steel that builds our skyscrapers, it is all part of a shared North American reality. You can draw lines on a map. You can build walls. You can impose tariffs, but you cannot legislate away geography. If the US continues down this path, if the 51st state fantasy becomes policy, the price won't just be paid by Canadians. It will be paid by the American family paying double for heat this winter. It will be paid by the auto worker in Michigan losing his job. It will be paid by a diminished United States, alone in a world that no longer trusts its word. We don't need Canada. The truth is, we need them more than we have ever dared to admit, and we might only realize it when the lights go out. I want to know what you think. Is this relationship salvageable, or has the damage been done? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to understand the raw materials that actually run the world, Make sure you're subscribed to the Metal Reserve.